Last time, we looked at a very rich text from the Zohar, which taught us a lot about, some of the very important aspects and principles of Jewish mysticism. And I want to build on that a little bit before we get into the texts which are on your handouts for this week. I want to go back to last week's handout and take a look at a little bit more of what the Zohar and others have to say about the role of the Torah in Jewish mysticism. So I'm going to pull up on the on the text on the share screen. The text I want us to look at here. This is a message specifically given to people in 13th century Spain, in the Jewish community, many of whom were advocates of a more philosophical approach and a non-mystical approach to Jewish life, to people who believed that the Torah was a book much like other books and certainly not to be compared to a lover. Right? So here's the message. Rabbi Shimon said, "Woe to the person who says Torah presents a mere story and ordinary words. If so, we could compose a Torah right now with ordinary words and better them all of them to present matters of the world." And by the way, let me interject here that you have a parallel to this today in people who say, wow, the Torah is such a beautiful literary work. It's better than Shakespeare. Well, it's one thing to say, yes, that the Torah is a great literary work, but that isn't the same as saying that the Torah is in some sense from God. It is, some sense divinely inspired. So Rabbi Shimon had that kind of critique in his time as well. And he says, even rulers of the world possess words more sublime. And so let's follow them and make a Torah out of them. But what you have to remember is that all the words of the Torah are sublime words, sublime secrets. They have a higher meaning than just, the fact that they might be a great, literary composition. Come and see. The world above and the world below are perfectly balanced. Israel below, the angels above. Of the angels, it is written, he makes his angels spirits. This relates to the celestial realm. But when they descend, they put on garments of this world. If they did not put on a garment befitting this world, they could not endure in this world, and the world could not endure them. If this is so with the angels, how much more so with Torah, who created them and all the worlds, and for whose sake they all exist. In descending to this world, if she did not put on the garments of this world, the world could not endure. So this story of Torah is the garment of Torah. Woe to the person who thinks that the garment, meaning the literary creativity, is the real Torah and not something else. He will have no portion in the world to come. That is why David said, the Psalm says, open my eyes so I can see wonders out of your Torah. That is what is under the garment of Torah. Come and see. There is a garment visible to all. When those fools see someone in a good-looking garment, they look no further. But the essence of the garment is the body. The essence of the body is the soul. So it is with Torah. She has a body, the commandments of Torah, called the embodiment of Torah. This body is clothed in garments, the stories of this world. Fools of the world look only at that garment, the story of Torah. Those who know more do not look at the garment, but rather at the body under that garment. The wise ones, servants of the King on high, those who stood at Mount Sinai, look only at the soul, root of all, real Torah. In the time to come, they are destined to look at the soul of Torah. Come and see, so it is above. There is garment, body, soul, and soul of soul. The heavens and their hosts are the garment. Knesset Yisrael. Remember, Knesset Yisrael is associated with the Sphira of Malchut, the 10th Sphira, is the body who receives the soul, beauty, Tiferet of Israel, the 6th Sphira Tiferet. So she is the body of the soul. The soul we have mentioned is Tiferet of Israel, real Torah. The soul of the soul is the holy ancient one. That refers to an even higher Sphira. All is connected, this one to that one. Woe to the wicked who say Torah is merely a story. They look at this garment and no further. Happy are the righteous who look at Torah properly. Just as wine must be contained in a jar, so Torah must be contained in this garment. So concerning Torah, look only at what is under the garment. All these words and all these stories are garments. So to the mystic, the Torah is not just made up of stories and words. The words are all sublime secrets. They are garments for the true wisdom. Angels, like the ones who come to Abraham, they appear as human beings. They put on the garments of this world. And the same thing is with the Torah itself, which puts on the garments of stories and words. But, you can't assume that the fine garments a person wears tells you anything about their character. The mystics see through the garments to the true meaning, to the soul of the Torah, the stories and the laws that it embodies. Right? So you want to see removing the garment in the same way that we saw it in the previous text, where the beautiful maiden who is unseen strips off the garments that separate her from the one who longs to know the ultimate meaning of Torah. Same thing here. Daniel, you have a question.
Yes, I do, but it may if the answer may be a little bit more clear to me now after I've raised my hand, but I will go ahead and say it. The literary value of the Torah, that you can read one passage 1,000 times and get 1,000 different meanings out of it. The metaphor, the symbology, what time you're reading, what era you're reading it in, be it the first century or this century. All of that stuff isn't just story, it is the evidence, and I hesitate to use this word, but of divine origin. That makes it divine. The fact that we are not allowed, we are required to reinterpret these words for every generation. That's what makes it divine. That doesn't make it, quote, just literature or just a story.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly one way of looking at it, Daniel, and I'm not here to disagree with that. It's not what the authors of the Zohar intended. They were trying to stress that they that there is an ancient wisdom about the Torah, which if you're not privy to that level of understanding, you don't really get the Torah. That's the level you have to have. In other words, we talk about 4 levels of interpretation of the Torah, right? There's the pshat, the straightforward meaning of the text. There's drash, interpretation. There's remez, which is allegory. And then there's sod, the mystical meaning of the text. And the argument of the authors of the Zohar and other Kabbalists at the time was that, number one, they were among those few who had been made privy to the sod. And number two, that without the sod, you didn't really understand the meaning of the Torah and its significance. Without that, you're just seeing the garments.
Okay. Like I said, I see what you're saying. These guys believe in a 4th level sod that I am not, because of I don't have access to it yet.
Well, join the club.
No, I mean, that's fine. I understand their position.
Yeah.
Or it seemed to me like they were. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
No, it's fine. I mean, you raise a very important point. From our perspective, we might see some of these aspects of Torah as the very things that give it divine significance. Right? The Kabbalists are coming from another angle.
But when they say when they're talking about this understanding they have because of access to the sod, are they saying that there is one understanding that is there, and that all the rest of this is sort of mental playing around?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little crass to say it this way, but they understand that they have the answers and you don't.
Well, see, that in and of itself strikes me as not Jewish. I'm being harsh here.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. However, notice that what they're doing in putting this into the Zohar is they are sharing some of that interpretation. Right? So now they're widening the room a little bit. Prior to the Zohar, many Kabbalistic teachers would not share these kinds of details about the mystical meaning of the Torah. So for instance, half a century earlier, when Nachmanides is writing his commentary on the Torah, Nachmanides very often says, I'm not going to explain this according to the Kabbalistic significance. Because he was among those who didn't believe that it should be shared with just anybody. Right? Well, the Zohar might not be understood by every Jew, but it was potentially accessible to every Jew. So again, they're widening the borders a little bit. Okay?
Okay, I'll drop. It still strikes me as dogma.
Okay, good. It is dogma of a sort, but they are not as convinced of their dogma as other Kabbalists prior to that time, such as Nachmanides. They're willing to, now why are they willing to open the gates a little bit and widen the room? Right? Well, because there's a crisis at hand. The crisis is twofold. On the one hand, you have Jews who are taking a more philosophical point of view about the Torah. And if you take that view, you can rationalize not keeping some of the commandments. Right? The second challenge is that the aggressive tactics of Christianity in the parts of Spain that the Christians have taken over. You gradually get to a point where the Jews are compelled to hear sermons designed to try to convert them in the synagogues, all of which are very heavy-handed and rarely had much effect on the Jewish community. But still, it's a power play, and it's intended to intimidate the Jews and ultimately to soften them up a little bit. And to say, you know what, why do you hold on to all of these, outmoded ideas? Right? And so the response of the Kabbalists is, well, these are not just outmoded ideas. These are the secret meaning of the text that the Christians certainly don't know, and many of you Jews don't know. And in order for you to understand this a little better, we're going to share more of it with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes complete sense. And I'm really going to think about it because I had not thought about the Kabbalists as being, I thought they were more searchers than they were preachers.
Uh-huh.
But go on.
Please continue. You had a comment or a question?
Following up on Daniel's question about whether there is one secret understanding of the message or messages in Torah, is the mysticism of the Zohar and the Kabbalists of that age and later that it's a process or it's a product? Is there one message, or is it the way you find that message?
It's both. And you find the message from other Kabbalists. And the message is also growing as more of the Kabbalists uncover new truths to be found within the Torah, which may not have been passed down, but which are still there to be uncovered.
But their truths aren't new, they're just not understood or revealed.
Right, they weren't revealed until this time.
If I could offer another comment back
Please.
to Daniel and everyone else, of course, but Daniel, I don't know if you would remember, but you may have been in the congregation of the Museum Minyan several years ago when Stuart Dow gave a Devar Torah and talked about how at different ages when you read Torah, it means the same passage means different things. The words never change, but when you're a bar mitzvah boy and you read anything, it has a certain meaning based on your life experiences, and then you become a young man and your life experience is different, and the meaning of the same passage in Torah is often different, and then you're a father and you have children and you see it again from even a different perspective.
I vaguely remember that, but I completely understand your point. Also, Lou, the way you articulated something just 30 seconds ago was what I've been trying to say. My conception of being Jewish is one of going through a process of understanding what God wants me to do and understand the message. It is not that I'm going to find it and it is going to be correct. And that has always been something that has attracted me from the time of my conversion. to Judaism and away from Christianity. And the idea that there is one answer to who is God is just really hard for me to push into a concept of being Jewish.
Yeah, let me add one other thing. Again, several years ago, Rabbi Rosen, in a sermon on Shabbat morning, said, I'm trying to quote this, "Embrace those who are seeking the truth. Beware of those who claim to have found it."
I have always said, Lou, don't trust anybody who's sure of much of anything.
But don't forget, if it's on the internet, it must be true.
Okay, so I have to caution you that the mystics are pretty sure that they've found the truth. They are much more like that group. Now, just to illustrate that, the rabbinic tradition teaches that the souls of all Jews, past, present, and future, were present at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. Right? The Zohar says to us, those who stood at Mount Sinai, right? Those were just the mystics, the Kabbalists. They are the ones who really were at Sinai. In one commentary, Professor Daniel Matt says, maybe only mystics are aware that they were at Sinai. So, yeah, all Jews were there, but not all of them remember the experience. There are only those who cultivate the memory through their devotion to finding the mystical truths of the Torah. They look only at the soul. That's the at the top of the page here, the look only at the soul, root of all, real Torah. In other words, they see beyond the surface and they penetrate to the deepest level of meaning. All right? So, other comments or questions about this text? Yeah, I would just emphasize that the Kabbalists are not the most tolerant Jews, right? Not of other Jews and not of non-Jews, right? Because they claim that they have the mystical truth contained within the Torah that other Jews and certainly non-Jews do not possess. And the non-Jews, of course, cannot possibly possess. But that's the kind of extreme position you might take under duress when you are faced with the people like the Christians in 13th century Spain who claim that they have the absolute truth and you don't.
Danny?
So it's a form of spiritual resistance. Yes, Rabbi Grenfest.
What still happens today, clearly. I mean, there are people who, again, you stay away from people who say they have the truth. But I like the idea of the garment. I wonder if many people today are just at the garment level of Torah. And maybe even less than the garment. They don't even know where the garment is. And that's a problem for everyone. But, truth is relative. And it's when you impose that on another person or people is when you start having problems.
Yes. Yes.
The other side of the coin of this point is that I worry a lot about today. There is a lot of non-Jewish influences into Jewish thought. It's almost like we've gotten to where, you can think such and such and such and such is a Jewish concept, and that's okay. I'm going to name a real extreme exception. Jews for Jesus or Messianic Judaism. There are people who say that's real Judaism. Well, that is impossible. I don't believe that. I mean, there are certain ways of looking, or combinations of other philosophies and religions into some kind of form of Judaism. And it's like anything goes. So that kind of puts me in the dogma camp. You know, if I were a Kabbalist and all of a sudden anything goes as to what defines Judaism or who is a Jew or what is Judaism, I would start going to a more dogmatic stand than I do now. I hope that made sense.
Yes. By the way, as I think I've mentioned this in passing, but let me underscore it a little bit. The Kabbalists, because they talk about having some direct line to a higher understanding of the Torah, they were vulnerable to being accused of undermining actual Torah observance, right? Because, you know, if you have a direct line, why do you need to, follow all these rules and regulations? Just plug into the line and then do what you're told. You don't need the Torah for that. The Kabbalists were vulnerable to that kind of criticism. And in response to it, they tended to be ultra traditional in terms of actual observance. They might be very creative in terms of reinterpreting the meaning of a ritual or a law, but they were very stringent in terms of the observance of the law itself. All right? Okay, so other comments or questions? Yeah, Roberto.
You mentioned something that somebody said, or the Kabbalistic said, that the souls, previous, now, and future, all the souls were at Mount Sinai.
Yeah, that's actually a rabbinic teaching.
Okay, so it means that if our souls were there then, and now we're here, somebody believes in the reincarnation then. Because it means that my soul was there at Mount Sinai.
Mm-hmm. The Kabbalists definitely believed in reincarnation. I don't think it had that much effect on their attitude towards the question of who was present at Sinai.
I don't think it necessarily means that your soul was there in another physical form, but your soul could have been there in the cloud, the way we understand today's technical cloud.
Yes, it was. it was not intended to be, understood in the sense that, all of our bodies were at Sinai.
Okay.
That would get very crowded too.
Danny, you mentioned that the Kabbalists and the authors here may believe certain things, but they observed the letter of the law. How could they not observe that? Couldn't by definition, they'd have to be really observant and follow everything to the letter?
Well, if you look at the phenomenon of mysticism in general, mysticism is often somewhat antinomian, anti-law. Because, if you have that direct line to plug into the divine wisdom, if you're cleaving to God all the time and you have that, connection that enables you to receive revelation on some level, so that's great. But then what do you need a Torah for? So,
But is that Jewish then? I mean, or is that heresy?
Well, it lent itself to be understood as heresy. And so to avoid that, the rabbis who were mystically inclined tended to be extremely stringent in terms of their traditional observance of Judaism. The meaning, that might be something else entirely. But that was okay. That didn't pose, thinking of a new meaning, giving a new understanding to the meaning of a mitzvah, that wasn't a threat to the mitzvot themselves.
I like the idea that you're really putting historical context to the Zohar, to the mystics. That really is an interesting concept to me, because I think it's important to know what's going on at that time and how these texts developed.
Yeah. Steve, if you're interested in reading about that some more, I can recommend a few
Please.
books that I think will help flesh that out for you a little
Good,
bit.
thank you. Good.
I've mentioned them in previous classes, but I can talk with you about it offline.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this idea of knowledge of Torah, of having a higher level of knowledge of Torah, goes right along with the knowledge of God in a very direct sense. Let me just pull back the share screen and bring up the next text, which comes from one of the early Hasidic masters, Pinchas of Horwitz, who was a contemporary of the Baal Shem Tov. Not exactly a student of the Baal Shem Tov, really one of the sidekicks of the Baal Shem Tov. Didn't really, they were contemporaries and friends. So here, Pinchas of Horwitz gives a nice illustration of this. He says, what is the meaning of this verse from Proverbs? B'chol derachecha da'ehu. What does it mean, know him in all your ways? What is that supposed to mean? When the Holy One, blessed be he, gave the Torah, the entire world was filled with the Torah. For it says, as I live, says the Lord, and as the Lord's presence fills the whole world. Thus, the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be he, are one. Now, there is nothing in which the Torah is not within it. This is the meaning of know him in all your ways. And anyone who says the Torah is one thing and the things of this world are another is a heretic. Right? So God who fills the world with Torah. The Torah relates to everything. So the Torah and God are both found together everywhere. If you learn Torah and you fulfill the mitzvot and you grasp the lessons of the mitzvot, that brings you into dveikut, into this deep intimacy with God. And Rabbi Pinchas is very entrenched on this point. So much so that if anybody denies it, they're not just wrong, they're a heretic. They are kofir, someone who denies an essential element of Jewish faith. And if there is nothing in which the Torah is not within it, then you can have an infinite number of meanings to the Torah. So it's a short step from this teaching to the idea that the Torah is made up of names of God, or really is one name of God. Gives the Torah itself a quality of divinity. Yes, Lou?
So this phrase, Torah and the Holy One, blessed be he, are one. Does the word Torah in this phrase refer to one of the Sfirot or the Sfirot in their entirety, and that all of the Sfirot are God, the Ein Sof?
Yes, the answer to all of that is yes. So, so Torah, which here is taken to mean the Torah Sheba al Peh, the oral Torah, is connected with the Sphira Malchut, or Shekhinah. Kud Shabrichu, the Holy One, blessed be He, is code language for the Sphira of Tiferet. And we know from what we saw back in the unit on Sphirot that the whole purpose of involvement with the Sphirotic realm is to foster the, having a clear channel and a very direct relationship, almost as if it were mating between Tiferet and Shekhinah.
Can I ask another question?
Please.
So this kind of, I hadn't thought of this as I was reading this earlier, but it just kind of popped into my head. That the fact that they are one, the Shema says Adonai Echad. It doesn't say Adonai v'Torah Echad. So is this a problem?
It's only a problem in terms of how you interpret it. Okay? So if you don't, but Pinchas says if you don't share that interpretation, if you don't share that the Torah is filled with the entire world, then you are missing an essential point, a central point in Jewish faith.
Well, there are certainly, I say this, things in this world that Torah doesn't attempt to explain. I can't even see it in a mystical way. Like, for example, and I've mentioned this before, the detailed physics of the world, the elementary particles and atoms and the ultimate cosmos. The Torah talks about creation of the universe and creation of stars and the sun and the moon. But I see it as God set it in motion and it happened. God didn't have his finger on every single thing any more than God has his finger on directing a hurricane to hit Houston or New Orleans.
Right. So I'm not here to argue that point.
Oh yeah, I know you're not. I know, but the mystics are.
But there are people who do believe that. There are people who do say that X happens only because it's preordained and God, we may not understand it. And that sometimes is an easy out to explain things that are very difficult.
Yes.
Very
there's a difference between preordination and God causing something to happen because of a hedonistic lifestyle in New Orleans, and that's why Hurricane Katrina hit there.
Right.
Pat Robertson being one of those who claimed that back at the time.
Yes. Yibadel l'chaim, may he be blessed with long life. I think Rabbi Grunfest is right that there are, those are easy and convenient answers to things that do not have a ready-made explanation and will not have a simple explanation.
But people are looking
really
for
the answer of small minds.
Well, but people are looking for it makes people feel better, or for whatever reason. But you're right. There are things that you just can't explain.
And that's the real explanation.
Sure, there are. How somebody who has a terrible illness and it's progressing badly wakes up the next morning healed. I mean, those things have happened, and there's no explanation for it. And preordination is also, I think, the antithesis of free will, because if we have free will, and especially if our free will is directed in a positive way to God, we're changing God. That's not preordination.
Yes.
Danny, was it Akiva who said everything is preordained, but humans have free will? It's just the opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a little mixed up, but
Yeah. But so beware of people, Kabbalists or not, who explain the inexplicable. Okay. I want to turn your attention now to a new topic. We're gonna leave off from this piece on the role of the Torah and turn you to the topic of sexuality in Jewish mysticism. You know, for a long time, we didn't hear in synagogues things like you would expect to hear in churches, certain kinds of churches, to the effect that God loves you. Right? Now, within normative Judaism, standard Jewish tradition, it's perfectly reasonable to say God loves you. Right? God's love for Israel is mentioned very frequently in the Siddur. Right? It's also a very powerful metaphor for the mystics feeling that desire for intimacy with God. So erotic themes play a very important role in Jewish mystical experiences and in some of the texts that we're going to see in this unit. I mention this in my book, and I think it's important to mention here that these themes did not replace physical sexual life. The mystics generally were people who married, who enjoyed marital intimacy. They believed in the standard rabbinic teaching that if you didn't procreate, then you were considered to be shedding blood, diminishing the image of God. The Zohar also teaches that one who does not procreate causes the Shekhinah to depart, right? But a married man is constantly accompanied by Shekhinah. So the mystics were also, for the most part, with rare exceptions, and later on we'll talk about one of them, most of these mystics were married, and at least on the surface, they enjoyed normal marital life. And certainly they viewed sexual relations as normative. They certainly also shared the rabbinic caution about the power of the sexual drive, but probably a lot of that was because they felt it and they knew it, right? And they knew that for some people, if it wasn't reined in by control of one's impulses, then it could overwhelm some people. And Jewish mystics never separated love from sex and from the procreative potential. Nowadays, in our culture, love and sex are often separated. But the texts that we are dealing with here do not reflect the attitudes of our culture. The mystics are always aware that the organ of procreation is related to the covenant. It is Brit. It is the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So the sexual act has ultimate significance for the mystic. We know that cleaving, devekut, is a primary term for the mystical relationship with God. And again, that is the same term that is used in the Bible when it tells us a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife so that they become one flesh. So it's not uncommon for dveikut and human eroticism to be understood in very similar terms. The difference is that, if you cleave to God too directly, you might not come back from that. Right? So let's take a look at the, couple of other quick points. Marital sexuality is normative, right? But non-marital sexuality is not accepted. Can, in fact, cause not only great harm in relationships, but it also really great cosmic harm, right? And that would be true not only of sex associated with idolatry, as was true in ancient times, but of homosexual activity and masturbation, for which the mystics save some of their most stringent condemnation. Right? It's the wasting of sacred seed, and it's pretty awful as far as they're concerned. So, what does the Torah tell us about the relationship between human beings? So let's take a look at our first text here. And again, this is from rabbinic midrash, from what we would regard as normative Jewish text, not necessarily, maybe a little bit from a mystical approach, but pre-Kabbalah, certainly. So this midrash starts off.
I'm sorry, Rabbi, quick question. Is this from your book that we're looking at?
You can find this text in the book, I believe. Okay?
Where?
In the chapter
Yeah.
on sexuality.
It's on page 195, but we don't have that handout yet, Danny.
Okay, so that's why that is supposed to be the handout that's on the web page to pick up for today, and I have it on screen share right here for you, for those of you who can do that. Okay, so it starts off on this verse from Psalms. You form me behind and before. Now, on the face of it, what does that verse from Psalm really mean? It's like saying, that I was in God's plan even before I was created. However, it lends itself to two different possible sharings. God formed you behind and before. So what does that mean? Rabbi Jeremiah ben Elazar said, when the Holy One, blessed be he, created the first man, he created him a hermaphrodite. As it is said, male and female he created them and called them Adam. Right? So the initial person was both male and female. Rabbi Samuel bar Nachman added, when the Holy One, blessed be he, created the first man, he created him du partsufim, double-faced. In other words, not one person facing yet another person, but one person like so, with face going in this direction, face going in this direction. Well, and one side is formed as a male, and the other side is formed as a female. Well, there is a little problem with that, of course. And so then God split him and gave him two backs, one on this being and one on the other. Right? Others objected to his interpretations, but it is written, he took mitzalotav, one of his ribs. And he says, no, it doesn't mean ribs, it means one of his sides. Right? just as it uses the word Selah in the book of Exodus as the other side of the tabernacle. It doesn't necessarily mean a bone, okay, or a rib. Right? So, we were all probably raised to believe that, according to one story in the Torah, Eve was formed from the rib of Adam. They say, nope, that's not how it was. You had these two people back to back, and God kind of slices them into two while Adam is asleep. And then he wakes up and presto, he's two different people. One male, one fully female. Right? So, the original human being was two-sided. Right? So, sexual union is a very natural kind of thing where each person finds their other half, so to speak. Right? And at least that's the goal, right? You find the person who completes you. Right? The union of male and female is actually a reunion because this is how you were originally. Right? And that has implications for how the mystics understood the significance of sex. Okay? Comments or questions up to here?
I know this isn't your area of expertise, Rabbi, but that story, did the Muslims believe something similar about Adam and Eve, that they were from one planet?
I don't know.
All right, never mind. Thanks. I'll look it up.
Sorry. Yes, Ann. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, it says they should become one flesh. And what I read in the Talmud is in their child. Is there anything in the Talmud that implies that it's something before their child comes, that they are one flesh, such as when they are engaged in?
I think that's assumed, because how were they to have a child if they were, how was the female side supposed
yes, but is that a moment of one fleshness?
It is, sort of. Not the way we would think of it.
How would we think of it?
We would think of it as sexual union.
And one fleshness is not sexual union?
In this text, it is the original way that the human being was.
Okay.
Now I think that it's also a lovely rabbinic metaphor for how human beings find someone who complete them, who is like, who takes you back to the original purpose of your life, who gives your life the kind of purpose that helps you to complete yourself, which you cannot have without that partner. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so next, here we have a text from a book called Igeret HaKodesh, the Holy Letter, a very early Kabbalistic book about sexuality. Right? We don't know who wrote this book. It was for a long time attributed to Nachmanides, 13th century Spanish Kabbalist. And in fact, you can purchase books which claim to be the writings of Nachmanides, which include Igeret HaKodesh. But scholars have pretty much conclusively dismissed the idea that he was the author of it. So it deals with the sanctity of marital relations and how they reflect a Kabbalistic significance, in other words, on the level of the Sfirot. So here is what he says. Know that the male is the mystery of wisdom and the female is the mystery of understanding. So you know some of the references to the Sfirot. Wisdom is Chokhmah, understanding is Bina. That's way, way up in the Sphirotic realm, right? And they are a masculine and feminine set of Sfirot. And the pure sex act is the mystery of knowledge. Such is the mystery of man and woman in the esoteric tradition, in the Sfirot. If so, it follows that proper sexual union can be a means of spiritual elevation when it is properly practiced. And the mystery greater than this is the secret of the heavenly bodies when they unite in the manner of man and woman. On all these matters of which we have spoken, the divine powers, the Sfirot, they are the mystery of the arrangement of the order of the universe, its structure in the likeness of males and females, in the secret of the giver and the receiver, and those are Hebrew terms that are masculine and feminine. The union of man with his wife, when it is proper, is the mystery of the foundation of the world and its civilization. So there's mystery in how both Chokhmah and Bina on the Sphirotic level operate, and there's mystery in how the male and the female person unite, right? It is kind of a mysterious process, right? So, nobody totally understands it. So they are bonded and connected with that higher purpose so much that sex performed with the proper pure intention brings about the desired result on the Sphirotic level. Right? It's even the reunion of the original couple that we saw in the Midrash. Right? And it's also the higher union that helps to sustain all life. So it's like if you don't understand sex, you don't understand how the universe works, which is problematic because I don't know too many people who understand sex. Right?
Do you?
Sure. Sure, Ann, right. Comments or questions up to here? Okay, so I want to just quickly show you the next little piece from Igeret HaKodesh. Abraham concentrated his thought at the time of union. His thoughts cleaved to the upper thoughts. In other words, you think certain things, and that has to do with the results of the sexual union. Therefore, he merited having a son worthy of what was promised to him by God. In the instance in which a man has no intention of concentration for the sake of heaven, that seed drawn from him is, as the rabbis put it elsewhere, a fetid drop, in which God has no portion, no share. It is called perverting his way. Right? And one who has an improper thought at the time of intercourse, that filthy thought defiles the drop, and from this issues forth an evil, wicked, and filthy foundation. So the best sex is when your thoughts are holy thoughts, and maybe if you think holy thoughts, then you'll get a holy child, preferably a holy son, of course, right? So since seed has to be devoted to such elevated purposes, so there is this strong reaction to masturbation in the mystical literature. But even permitted intercourse can be problematic because if you, if your thoughts aren't in the right direction, then that can have an effect on the offspring that is created. okay, and on the effects on the higher level in these sfirot. So, the sexual revolution was not present in Igeret HaKodesh.
What would they say about, quote, hooking up? Not so much.
Gevalt. Yeah.
So, Rabbi,
That's definitely out.
Right.
Hooking up is like, hooking up with the Sitra Achra, with the other side.
Yeah.
Or as we have called it in this class, the other side.
so Rabbi,
Yes, Daniel.
I think it might be unfair to say this, but it strikes me that when they're talking about sex, they're talking about a male experience of it. That might be unfair, but I'm going to say it.
No, it's not unfair at all.
So that leads me to my question. How did they deal with feminine sexuality? Did they say, yes, a woman has the exact same drives with, and should be managed the same way? Or?
They're conscious of the rabbinic texts, which emphasize the need for the male to bring satisfaction to the female. Okay? So they can't really deny that. But there is also a strong strain in the rabbinic tradition, which suggests that women either shouldn't study Torah or don't fully understand Torah, or that there are some negative consequences to teaching women Torah, which play into certain prejudices. And so you don't see evidence of female Kabbalists, right? And you don't see that, these things are shared with female students of Torah.
But
however, there are those who kind of dispute this approach. In fact, Lawrence Kushner, a Reform rabbi who's very big in the field of Jewish mysticism, wrote a novel called Kabbalah, A Love Story, in which he theorizes that the author of the Zohar is actually a woman. Right? So I leave it to you to seek out that book if you're interested.
Well, you went exactly where I was going. If you accept that women's sex drive is equivalent to men's, you cannot, and that sex and love of God are very similar, or the experience of God and sex are similar, or whatever, then you're left with a logical argument that women have the same ability to touch God as they do men.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that they would agree with that. So it just seems to me like they've created a rational, logical corner in a box that they're not going to be able to get out of.
Yeah. So we will carry on with more of this next Sunday.
Sorry,
Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you then.
Thank you,
Have a
Rabbi.
good week, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Kronfeld.